the coherence, I guess, at the executive level between the head of marketing, head of product, head of engineering must be very tight, and at the director level must be very tight. And I guess talk about how you stay on the same page with how does a VP of marketing, VP of product, VP of engineering stay on the same page? What does that look like? Do they meet once a week? Are they emailing each other? Are they slacking each other? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that those relationships are critical. So your relationship with your peer at all levels is important, right? So at the exec level, yes, you got to be on the, you're going to disagree with each other, right? But that disagreement needs to be figured out, just like your co-founders, right? If you're starting a company with someone else and you have built a startup that's got hundreds of people, everything depends on those two people, your co-founder and you. A lot of it depends on that harmony between the two. Let's say you disagree with each other. How do you think that's going to be sort of disseminating into the full organization, your disagreement, right? And so how you manage disagreements and tension is critical. There's going to be disagreement and tension. You got to close yourself into a room, figure it out. And when you come out of that room, then it's a unified front, right? And so working that out at the exec level, at the director level, at the peer manager level, even honestly, it really has to go all the way. Having that respect to be able to work out disagreements is critical.
And what are the collaboration mechanisms you've seen healthy software engineering organizations use, and what do they look like? I'd love for you to just talk about in terms of, are there days when there's no meetings? Is IM used more than email, or are you annotating issues in Jira more to communicate? And I mean, I'd love to understand, what have you seen works the best in the highest performing software engineering organizations?
I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions, strong opinions about this. I don't necessarily personally have strong opinions about it. To me, it's whatever works for any given team. I'm generally more loosey-goosey on this stuff, honestly, because I think that any given team ends up liking certain different tools, right? And certain different way of working, leveraging those tools. So the dynamics of teams is a lot more important to me than here's the general way we should all work together. Now, I have to tell you that since the COVID era, right, this remote working has definitely made me think there is certain things that one needs to do for a fully remote organization, which we've all become now, to be able to function well. And I don't by no means have all the answers, but I know that some things are harder. Like everything being in Slack, okay, it's good because Slack is kind of your go-to, I want to have a conversation with anyone. But try finding a decision that was made in Slack, right? It's just difficult. So how do you manage that? And how do you make sure decisions are well documented? How do you search the Slack archives, right? It's hard. So we are trying to put some frameworks around that, where I work now at Kong. I don't have strong opinions on it, honestly. Like, for example, I know that the biggest question often comes up to, do we use Jira or do we not use Jira? Or do we use something else, right? I don't have a strong opinion on that. And in fact, we have some teams that use Trello, some teams that use Jira, and it works really well for the teams that use Trello. They love it. We have another team that just uses GitHub, and that's fine, in my opinion, as long as it's working. The system is in harmony.
So how, if you're a CEO, how should a CEO know how? Tell me more. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a CEO of a 3,000 person kind of startup in the late stages, and he was venting how, in the early days he used to do work and actual meaningful stuff, and now it's a whole different dynamic of regulations and just working with government and working with other investors and blah blah blah, company survival things, and he misses, and he says the only alerts he ever gets about product is when something is literally about to hit the fan. And and I was asking the question, so how do you know what's happening in product? Because I really don't. I just get messages, oh my God, now I have to have a firefight and get people in the room and we fight the fire. but that's kind of not fair on the CEO. And how does so talk to me about role of CEO, what the CEO's responsibility is to not put him or herself in the position of only being a firefighter, and how can a good product engineering sales organization upward manage towards the CEO, and how can a CEO, how does the CEO keep in touch and measure and things like that?
Oh man, that's a tough question. It's a great question though.
But you know what? I couldn't think of anyone better to ask, because you've worked with CEOs. You've worked with Greg at MuleSoft, at Kong and other places. You worked with Thomas Kurian. So there's not a better person I would value an answer from about this.
Thank you. So maybe I'll answer it in layers. First, the product team should be very close to the product. It sounds like an obvious thing to say, but I've seen product org that feel like using the product is not a requirement, right? And it's because I'm not a technical product manager. This is a technical product. We just come up with requirements. We don't really use the product. As crazy as it sounds, I mean, this is pretty, like, I've seen it very often. So all the way to the VP of product, right? To the CPO, I would even say, they got to be avid users of the product. And therefore, they should be able to, once every week, maybe once every month, be able to go use the product and be able to see what state is at, because otherwise you're going to lose track of it. You're not going to use it intensely, but you should be able to go through the general top-level use cases of the product and get a sense of how it's doing, right? And having that kind of poking here and there by the VP of product or the executive in charge of product, ideally the engineering executives as well, is a healthy one, because oftentimes the reason why these things bubble up to the CEO only as fires is because the VP of engineering and VP of product themselves aren't really poking into the product. And at least I can tell you with the folks you mentioned, every time I've been in trouble, it's because there's a good reason, right? And I've been out of touch from the product itself, right? And so staying in touch is really important. Now, should the CEO or should that exec at the levels you mentioned, how do they stay in the product? I don't think that they should be using the product all the time. It's just they got too many other things to do. They should trust their engineering and product execs to be doing the things I mentioned. Now, the best way they stay in touch is always talking to customers. And by the way, we can talk about product and customer touch points. So a whole other thing. But those exec, the CEO, this Thomas Kurian of the world, I know, stay in touch with customers all the time, right? And talk to customers about how things are going. One of the things Greg used to do, I think he used to go and talk to our customers and talk about support. I think people raved about MuleSoft support all the time, right? And how good support was. And that's one of the areas where, for example, the CEO having an idea of how our support is doing, how fast are we responding to this, will prevent those fires going up, right?
Yeah.
I know I didn't answer your question with an exact answer, but it's just a very tough one. And that's just observations, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean, the takeaway for me is, as a CEO, you don't have to tinker into the product, but if the product people are themselves tinkering into the product, that itself is going to lead to a healthy upward management dynamic in a very subtle way. So I think to me, that's the answer.
I would say that, sorry, product-led growth will help with this too, right? Part of the reason why products, the fires where it's the product is just not working, often happens because it's being sold, but it's not being used, right? With product-led growth, a product like AWS, this doesn't happen because it first used and then really sold in a big way, right? And that prevents fires because first has to actually be very useful before the big deals happen.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is like, there's so many different answers to the question I asked you, because there is Mark Zuckerberg who has a Sheryl, right? So Mark, all the stuff that are not product, Sheryl Sandberg takes care of. I think Greg Schott had Simon, and and Simon Parmet. And we've talked about this, like, and Simon was like Greg's right hand, left hand, everything man, just, you know, helping to run the company. Um, but you know what intrigues me is like Andy Jassy. Like he,
Yeah.
you know, if you listen to the keynote, now I don't know if Andy takes a week to rehearse this or if this is actually an organic thing, but it's so impressive how he gives his keynotes. He literally gets into like, you know, literally like the nitty gritties of like, or he'll talk about like Aurora. What is the CEO of AWS doing talking about Aurora? That's like triple click. I mean, dude, just talk about database. No, you know, it's amazing how he's so wide but so deep. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, it's very interesting. I don't think there's a right answer, but there's so many different patterns.
There is. And knowing about the product, don't get me wrong, is not a bad thing, right? Using it to the point where you know all the time whether there's going to be a fire or not, that's the toughest one. You know what? I was working with Thomas when I was at Oracle, and everyone knows this about Thomas Kurian, right? In that he knows the bug numbers. The hot bug numbers, he'll tell you, like, you know, Sumit, bug number, whatever, how's that going? And you're like, okay, I'll have to be on top of things.
Exactly. I mean, I remember the stories you shared with me you're on a conference call and he was going through a spreadsheet and you said, Reza, you know, what's going on? And for a guy that's that senior and that wide is going that deep. Yeah. It's like, I guess it's a personality thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.